Hey, I'm Matt Manny. Thanks so much for joining me for session number 5, The Heart of Hospitality. Again, as I've mentioned before, we've really enjoyed putting these thoughts together. Amanda and I have enjoyed writing the book, The Eshel Table. And again, I would encourage you, as you go between your sessions, as you have your in-between time, to read through those chapters in that book and be able to really, it does a deep dive on these things that we're talking about. And really, there's a lot of practical things that are in that book, as well as a whole section, multiple chapters on meals you can prepare with recipes and different ideas to help you get on your way to having hospitality and using Eshel and creating an Eshel table, if you will, in your life. As we jump into this session, we're looking at the heart of hospitality, and we see Romans 12:15. Paul writes these words: "Be happy with those who are happy and weep with those who weep." We use hospitality, we use food, we use drink, we use a safe place, a comfortable place, really as a means to an end, as a bridge. It's not about having the perfect meal. It's not about pouring the perfect cup of coffee. It's not about having the right candle burning or the right music. It's not about making sure things are just right. And while we can put a lot of time and effort and energy into focusing on those things, really the goal is to create a space and place for us to be able to connect with people and ultimately to be able to help people connect with God. Because as people feel comfortable and have a connection with you as a child of God, they can really get an understanding and a sense of who God is. Jesus says, if you want to know God, you have to get to know me. If you want to see God, know what God is like, look at me. I'm the Son of God. I am the God in flesh, if you will. Now, people can't see Jesus, but they can experience and see Jesus in and through your life. And that is a great expression that can take place through hospitality. As you see in your notes there, we look at this, the heart of hospitality. The big idea for us is this, that hospitality is a tool to reach people's hearts, that Eshel can produce life change for people around us. It's really about reaching people's hearts, developing trust and reaching them. So we find in Romans chapter 12 that Paul, as he's talking to the Romans, gives 10 benefits of really gathering around a table. Now, Paul doesn't put it in the context of gathering around a table. He does talk about hospitality in Romans chapter 12. He talks about gifting as well in Romans chapter 12. But we're going to look at 10 benefits that are outcomes of gathering around a table. Like, some people say, well, what do you talk about when you gather with other people? Like, what do you do? Sometimes we play games. Sometimes we'll watch YouTube episodes. But most often, we'll sit and we'll talk. We'll connect. I've seen people who are super chatty and talkative. They really enjoy it because it's the chance to be heard. But I've also seen people who are extremely introverted, who normally in a larger group of people wouldn't speak, especially Sunday morning before or after church. Folks that come in and they'll meet me and they'll say, "Hi, Pastor," but then they'll head out on their way. But then when we've had them over for a cup of coffee or for dessert or for a meal together after church, it's amazing to see people who are extremely introverted all of a sudden begin to open up and share their life story. Why? Because they've had something to eat, they've had something to drink, the walls have come down, and they feel comfortable and at ease, and the trust is there, and they begin to share what's going on in their life. And as they begin to share, they begin to open up for what God can and will do in their life. So let's look at some benefits that we have, we see from Romans chapter 12. The first benefit is for support. Gathering around a table offers the opportunity for support. Paul writes this to the Romans in verses 16 to 18. "Live in harmony with each other. Don't be too proud to enjoy the company of ordinary people." That's hospitality. "Don't think you know it all. Never pay back evil for more evil. Do things in such a way that everyone can see you are honorable." Verse 18, "Do all that you can to live in peace with everyone," to be able to provide support. Some people are going to come and they're going to sit down, and you may hear them say some things at your table that you do not agree with. They're going to be processing life. Some people will be grieving over a situation, maybe a job situation or a relationship, or maybe they're going to be real braggadocious and prideful and talk about all these great things that they can do. And in your mind, you're thinking, like, I've got other stuff to do than hear about how you won a high school championship 25 years ago and you still are living back in those days. That's okay. But the idea is that people need support. They need to know that somebody cares about them. And one of the greatest ways you can show that is right here, just listening. It's been said that God's given us 2 ears and 1 mouth so we can do twice as much listening as we do talking. The second benefit is for affirmation. For affirmation, Romans 15, verse 7, we see this. It says, therefore accept each other as Christ has accepted you, so that God will be given glory. When you open up your home and sit down to have a meal, you show a great acceptance and affirmation of another person. Hey, I value you, I value your time, and I've actually put time into preparing a meal for you. What's amazing about this, and this is one of the difficult things about being hospitable, you're going to spend hours, quite a bit of time, thinking through and preparing a meal, or thinking through and preparing, hey, where are we going to go to get together? And you'll spend money, and you'll spend time and energy, and they'll spend just a few moments eating. It's like Thanksgiving. We spend days and weeks preparing for a Thanksgiving Day meal. When it comes to preparing the turkey and the mashed potatoes and all the food, all this stuff, and we set it out there. I cut up the turkey, and Amanda gets the dishes out. We all work together to make the table spread look wonderful. And then our whole family guys together. In 15 minutes, it's all gone. So literally, you've got weeks of preparation all done in 15 minutes, right? And so again, it's going to happen. That's going to happen when you have a table, and you're going to have people that may criticize your meal. You may have people that don't say thank you. That's okay. But the goal is, hey, I value you, and I'm going to put time into you by preparing a meal for you. We have number 3 for celebration. Romans 12:15, be happy with those who are happy, to celebrate. Boy, we celebrate all the time. Birthdays, anniversaries. We celebrate accomplishments and promotions and all these. We celebrate if it can be clapped for and praised, we celebrate it. Whether it's for us as a family or for our friends or for our church family, it's a great opportunity to learn how to celebrate things. Number 4, for comfort. The rest of verse 15 says, weep with those who weep. Galatians 6:2 says, share each other's burdens, and in this way obey the law of Christ. If you find yourself that you're having a meal with somebody and you're eating, and you look down at their plate and you just happen to notice, boy, they really haven't touched their food, all of a sudden you realize they're processing life so much so that they've forgotten to eat, and you know you're in a sweet spot. We had a friend over one time, one of our neighbors, and they'd been going through some tough times, and it had been just a really, really difficult season for them. And so it was a holiday, and we had spent some time together as a family celebrating. We invited this person over, had a good time with them, and they're kind of sharing and just kind of processing and grieving over some things. And then all of a sudden they kind of looked around and said, well, why did you have this meal, and what's going on? And we said, well, it's Christmas. And they said, are you kidding? It's Christmas? This is how difficult the season that they were going through was. This is how difficult and how sad they were about what was taking place in their life, so much so that they had totally missed what day it was, and they missed the celebration. But we sat there. It was 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. We had some leftovers, and we sat there with them, loving on them and having hospitality and a chance to go ahead and comfort them and try to encourage them. We see number 5, challenge. It's for challenge. He says there in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24 and 25, let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works, to motivate one another. That's the word for challenging. We see in verse 25, let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encouraging one another, especially now as we see the day of his return drawing near. And so it might be something where somebody says, hey, here's what I'm going through, here's what I'm thinking, what are your thoughts? And you can give some feedback. Maybe you hear something and you've got a really good relationship with them, and you say, hey, can I offer you some advice? Or can I offer you some feedback? Can I speak into this with you? It's always good to lead with that, because unsolicited advice isn't usually received well at all. And so as you have a chance to challenge somebody's point of view, it's not about we're trying to correct somebody or put them in their place or say I'm right and you're wrong. But if you hear somebody saying something, it's a great way to be able to, after you've had a meal, they've had something in their stomach, they've had a chance to sit and just connect with you. The challenge will be much more well received when you get a chance to talk and say, hey, why do you think that way? What are your thoughts on this issue? You made this decision and it didn't work out well in the past. Here you are again. Well, what are your thoughts about this? And you can lovingly be able to challenge them and encourage them, especially instead of going cold turkey. Hey, can we talk? That's probably not going to go too well. We see number 6. This leads right into how to handle conflict resolution. In Romans 12:19 to 21, Paul writes these words. He says, friends, don't take revenge. Leave that to the righteous anger of God, because the Bible says that I will take revenge. I will pay them back, says the Lord. Instead, if your enemy is hungry, feed them. If they're thirsty, give them something to drink. In so doing, it will heap burning coals of shame on their heads. Don't let evil conquer you, but conquer evil by doing good. Isn't this crazy? And I'll check this for a minute. He says there in verse 20, look there in your study guide, if your enemy is hungry, give them something to eat. What's the first step of Eshel, the framework? Food. If they're thirsty, give them something to drink. What's the second step in the Eshel framework? It's giving somebody something to drink. And then we see number 3, in so doing, you'll heap burning coals of shame on their heads. Now, here's the irony. I remember as a kid reading this verse and thinking, man, this is great. I'm gonna kill them with kindness. And really, the Bible's saying that in the end, that I can give them something to eat and give them something to drink, and then I can stomp on their toes or kick them in the shins, right? Because I do a little bit of good, and then I can do a little bit of bad. I can go ahead and maybe criticize them or be snarky or sarcastic, and that's not at all what Paul's talking about here. There's some Bible scholars, and according to ancient tradition, one of the thoughts that some people believe Paul was referring to here was this, is that people, when they would wake up in the morning and they would get ready to start their day, if overnight the coals of fire in their little makeshift oven or in their hearth in their home, if all the coals were burned out and they couldn't start a fire to begin to make bread or start their day or heat their water or whatever it might have been that they were working to do, they would go next door to a neighbor's house and they would say, hey, do you have some burning coals I can use to go ahead and get a fire started back in my home? The idea was this: they would put coals in a clay jar, and they would take those coals in the clay jar, and they would take them back in their house. That jar they might have, they'll put sand in the bottom maybe to keep things cool, and then put in those hot coals, and then literally carry it on their head to go over to their house. There's also some traditions where they talk about how this idea is the sense of being repentant, to actually changing your ways, and that a symbol of this, of forgiveness and restoration of a relationship, is the idea of putting coals on top of your head and giving. It's like a peace offering to somebody, saying, hey, I want to be able to encourage you and to make amends for our relationship. And so it's not about a sneaky way of getting back at somebody, but it's really about blessing somebody. What's interesting to note is this, is that fulfills the third way of the Eshel framework of giving comfort to somebody. You put warmth back into their home. You put warmth back into the relationship when you take that step. Number 7, we see conflict resolution. For counseling, somebody may come and ask you for help and for thoughts. 1 Thessalonians 5:14, brothers and sisters, I urge you to warn those who are lazy, encourage those who are timid, take tender care of those who are weak, and be patient with everyone. We've had many, many moments where this principle, number 7, we just spent time listening to people and then giving a little bit of counsel. You'll find yourself hearing so many things that people, as they drop their guard, you'll get a chance to speak truth into their life. Number 8, for dreaming. I love this. This is one of my favorite points. Philippians 1:6 says this, I am certain that God, who began the good work within you, will continue to work until it's finally finished on the day of Jesus Christ. God is working out in you your calling, your who He created you to be, what He called you to do, and then the opportunity for you to go ahead and dream about those things. I've sat down with people and they said, I really don't know what I should do with my life, and it's a chance for me to say, I have an I see in you conversation with them. Where this is what I see in you, and this is where I see God's gifted you. And sometimes it takes somebody else speaking truth and value and encouragement into our lives to cheer us on, for us to really realize those dreams and opportunities that God has set before us. And that can take place around the table with hospitality. Number 9, for encouragement. 1 Thessalonians 5:11 says this, so I encourage each other and build each other up just as you are already doing. Paul encourages the Thessalonians, hey, you're already encouraging people, keep doing it, and even more so. You've got your foot on the pedal, now push it to the floor, if you will. Use those moments to encourage people. It's easy for us to look at somebody else's life and find something to correct them about. It's easy for us to find something in someone else's life and say, well, I don't know. We can judge them or be jealous of them. But yet Paul says, listen, use this cue of food, something to drink, and comfort. Use that as a cue to encourage people, not to be flattering and not to be insincere or disingenuous, but to be encouraging to them and say, hey, not only am I going to feed you your stomach, but I'm also going to feed your soul and encourage your heart. We see then number 10 then as we wrap up, for life change. All those culminate into life change. Philippians 2:13 for life change. For God is working in you, giving you the desire and the power to do what pleases him. Colossians 3:10. Put on your new nature and be renewed as you learn to know your Creator and become like him. When we have these gatherings together, it's an opportunity for us to help people take one step forward in their walk with God or their journey toward faith. Maybe if they've never put their faith and trust in Jesus, you can use a meal, a gathering around a table to help people take one step closer, to understand who you are, to understand how you've come to faith, and be able to guide them and help them take their step in becoming more like Jesus, in discovering who God created them to be and what he called them to do. And you can be the one to walk alongside them on that journey. We see this last of all, this statement for us, that together is a hallmark of hospitality. Together is a hallmark of hospitality. We've talked about previously about discovering your hospitality type. We've talked about not bearing the burden alone. And now we find it's not only working together to provide hospitality, but we also have together in enjoying hospitality with those we invite into our homes as guests. That together is important. Together, whether it's our community of faith or a family of God, together is what is a hallmark of loving one another. Jesus says, by this will everyone know that you're my disciples, by the love you have for what? One another. The one another is the same idea of being together in fellowship. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to go ahead and go through your discussion questions, spend some time in prayer, and then we'll see you next time as we talk about how to use hospitality